Welcome to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This show features questions from the Personality Hacker community that we answer in about 10 minutes. We've been using personality types in our coaching for years, and we'd love to answer your questions about personal growth through the lens of type. You can find out more about us at personalityhacker.com. Okay, now let's hear today's question.
Hi, Joel and Antonia. My name is Matt, and I am an ENFP from Naperville, Illinois. And my question for you is about two of the specific items on the Myers-Briggs. The one question about working in bursts versus at a steady pace, and the other question about rules applying to everybody or rules applying only to other people. So what I'm wondering is what these two things are getting at in terms of cognitive functions or in terms of any of the 8 letters that make up our types. So I'd love to hear about that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, for the question. You're actually asking 2 questions.
Yeah, he knows.
and they're not actually related to each other directly. So we're going to take one and answer it in 10 minutes and not both of them. But I will throw you a bone to the second question. So this idea of rules for thee and not for me, or exception to the rule, I think as an ENFP, with ENFP preferences, Matt, what's going on for you is you could just look at your co-pilot of introverted feeling or authenticity. And again, this function sometimes feels like, well, I feel very specific and nuanced and I just have a very internal sense of this. So I feel like it's okay to make an exception to the rule because of all my internal feelings about something. Sometimes introverted feeling authenticity users can feel this way. They can feel like, well, yeah, the external rule makes sense, but you have to accommodate the individual person in the situation. And I know myself the most of anyone. So I think I can make an exception for myself here. I would never want to make an exception for other people. They need to stick to that external rule. But for me, I think I can break that rule and still be okay. And I'm the only one that can judge that anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself that permission. So I think that's maybe what you're speaking to for that second question. But let's go ahead and pin that for a second. Let's talk about your first question, which is this idea of working in bursts, almost like this manic work mode that I think ENFPs sometimes can tap into. What's going on there? It's hard, I think, for ENFPs, and Tony, you could speak to this too as an ENTP, because I think you ENTPs also struggle with this, that consistent, everyday, little by little movement toward a project or goal. For me as an ENFP, I have the same preferences. I would rather do a big weekend project than try to do a little bit every day on a long timeline.
Yeah, I think actually all perceivers might feel this way to some extent, not just people who use extroverted intuition or exploration like ENPs do. But I could see it being of special interest to somebody with ENFP preferences because the working in bursts, it appeals to both of the extroverted perceiving functions. So like I mentioned just now, extroverted intuition or exploration. It also appeals to extroverted sensing or sensation. But to somebody who has EFP preferences, they're going to have their 10-year-old or tertiary function of extroverted thinking or effectiveness also be influencing their desire to make things happen. And that function is a little bit more associated with making progress over time. So that is a more paced out way of looking at things. But if it's your 10-year-old or tertiary function, it's going to be something influencing you, and you're never going to have any certainty of whether or not you're doing it well.
And you get real impatient, right? You want things to happen right now because that long timeline feels like suffering.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. Now, when you marry extroverted thinking or effectiveness with, say, introverted sensing or memory, like STJs do, or introverted intuition or perspectives, like the NTJs do, both of those functions are a little bit more slow and steady wins the race. Yeah. They are better at pacing themselves. They're better at sort of setting things down and picking them up.
I think the other challenge here is the driver of ENFPs, that extroverted intuition exploration, Antonia. It is so hard sometimes to get in that mode, to activate that. It's easy on a low level, oh, that's an interesting idea over there. You're going through the life all the time using it, but to use it in like a work mode where you're actually able to create ideas and ideate, sometimes it can take a minute to get warmed up into it. And when you get there, you don't want to let that go. So you want to stay working in the burst because all your ideas are there now. And as you use it, it starts to grow and gain energy and get more ideas and more output. And you're like, there's no way I'm stopping this. I'm going to work through the night. I'm going to work till 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm on a run. I'm on this intuitive run, and I've got all this happening right now. The fig tree is ripe, if you will, metaphorically speaking, or analogously. And so I've got to eat as much fruit as I can because right now is my opportunity.
Well, and there's some information backing that. Our friend and colleague, Dr. Dario Nardi, said that according to EEG scans, the function of extroverted intuition is the hardest to get into a flow state, but once it's there, it's the hardest to get out of a flow state.
Yeah.
And so if you have lived your entire life experiencing that, whether or not you have that specific language for it, you know what we're talking about. It's hard to ramp up, but once you're there, like you said, Joel, you don't want to let it go because you know that there's an opportunity here. So for all EP types, working in bursts is a tendency. For ENP types, working in bursts is a fact of reality, right? It's like once I'm here, awesome, and I've got to capitalize on this energy. But as somebody who has extroverted thinking or effectiveness as a 10-year-old or tertiary function, right? That's your 10-year-old function in the CAR model. There's going to be a sense of there's something wrong with that. Because as I mentioned before, the function is usually associated with a more steady function. It's usually partnered with in the outside world and your observation, you're observing things in the outside world. It's usually partnered with either introverted sensing or memory or introverted intuition or perspectives. And these are functions that are much better at having a longer timeline in view and picking things up and setting them down in a much easier pace, right? They don't struggle as much with getting into flow. They don't struggle with that energy. Like they might struggle with the energy to do something in general. But once they're on pace, now they're doing it slow and steady over time. So the one thing I would mention is, and you didn't say this, I'm completely inferring it. You did not imply it at all. But I would say it's okay to work in bursts if you have EFP preferences. Please don't have your uncertain, eternal child, 10-year-old function of extroverted thinking or effectiveness get weirded out by the fact that you are not pacing yourself as much or that it's much more difficult to pace yourself. Learning how to pace yourself is important, but don't beat yourself up in the meantime. The function is more focused on making progress over time. So if you're making progress over time, you're winning, all right? That's all you need. You just need to know that your extroverted thinking or effectiveness is happy at the concept of making progress at all. And it's okay if it's happened a bit in fits and starts.
One of the phrases I've started using is appointments are better than deadlines. And it kind of speaks to this idea of maybe I'm not good at staying on the pace and doing something small every day toward a deadline. Like it's really hard to do that. But I could create like a 2-hour appointment to gather 2 other people together to workshop something and to brainstorm and try to figure it out in the moment. And to me, that's almost like working in fits, like we're working in bursts, if you will, like fits and starts. Like I create the appointment to do that, and now I've got a container that burst energy can fit into. So I think there's some strategies. And speaking of strategies, by the way, I recommend if you're an ENFP listening or any personality type listening, we have an owner's manual for your personality type over at personalityhacker.com that talks about these ideas. And I think the key is you need to know where it's okay to give yourself permission to be how you're naturally wired and where maybe you need to work on finding other strategies. And to your point, Antonia, like in the owner's manual, for example, if someone had this for ENFP, you'd get a sense of, oh, it's okay to work in bursts. I understand I'm wired that way. Now, you might have a job or a situation where you have to work a little bit more on a timeline, so it'd be good to learn that skill. But in some ways, it's understanding what permissions we can give ourselves. And I think like an owner's manual, for example, for your type over at our website could help you zoom in on the aspects of your personality and knowing which parts you shouldn't give yourself permission for and which parts you should give yourself permission for. Just that alone can change your life, right? Knowing those parts. So I would really encourage that, Matt, too. If you don't have a owner's manual for your personality type yet, that it really has a lot of this underpinning. It has a lot of this nuance to it that can help you make better decisions and set up the life that you want. And Tony, we've got about a minute before, roughly about a minute left. Do you have anything you wanted to mention about his second question, Matt's second question about rules for thee, not for me. I know I pinned that, and I didn't expect to have some time. You could throw some thoughts in quickly before we're done.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that we have extra time. So the one thing I would mention is, or the only thing I would say to that is, there are a lot of reasons why somebody could have rules for thee and not for me. You could have thinking preferences and only follow rules that make sense to you as an individual, and yet believe that that laws and rules are important for societies to follow in order for us to stay, coherent, or to stay cohesive, rather. And so there's actually a lot of different reasons why a person might feel that way, but it is going to be a different cognitive angle they're coming at, and that's like its whole episode all by itself.
Of course. I think we're talking about the ENFP directly, because Matt is an ENFP. He has ENFP preferences.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that, right? I think introverted feeling or authenticity has a tendency to see things a little bit in terms of double standards. It's one thing that it has to fight against, a tendency has to fight against, because you're living yourself, right? You're in your own experience. So you have all sorts of modifiers and context for why you make the choices you do, whereas you're just observing somebody else and you might not be on the inside. So you don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And so you might be a harsher judge of their behavior if they're not following rules. So there is a tendency for that. And just having intuitive preferences in general makes it so that it's much easier to marginalize laws, right? Laws that keep culture and society cohesive, because it's like, well, that's dumb. Why are we doing that? Because extroverted intuition or exploration is a more disruptive function. So you're kind of pre-wired to be able to do that. But fortunately, there's a thinking and a sensing process right there available to go. And also maybe we should just kind of, not just be complete and total, anarchists. Maybe there's a reason why we have some of these rules.
Thanks, Matt, for the question. You can ask your own question about personality types or personal growth. Visit personalityhacker.com/questions. We also have programs designed to help you with your personal growth through the lens of personality types. Again, visit personalityhacker.com and find the program that's made just for you. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode. Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships. But what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality, and then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity. Because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first. Because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.